fancy intro music. Yeah! Woo!
Hey everybody, today I want to talk about how so much advice that we've given in the game has changed just over the years and over time. And one of the big pieces of advice that, hell, I talked about, especially to spenders, but really to everybody, was talking about should you skip the 42 ships? And at one time, this is actually something we talked about pretty significantly. And in fact, let me just go ahead and show you that we talked about it pretty significantly. Like, here's an example of just way back. Look how long ago this was. This is like ages ago. And we talked about this for a long time. Just the advice of, yeah, it makes a lot of sense to skip the 42s. And we're just using those as an example. This is going to overreachingly talk about many things, just like my beard is covering up my entire face. But if you look more modernly, what we have now is people like myself and again, I wanted to show these, give examples. These are just regular players also giving advice and thoughts and what they consider, how things change in the game. And one thing that's changed when it comes to do you skip the 42s or not is how armadas have become such a primary focus in the game. Not that they weren't important before, but that you look at right now what you can do in the game in a couple different layers. And what you can is have success as an individual player with not a ton of group effort. And to do that, you really need multiple ships. And what I have found, and what a lot of players have found, is that, for example, just using solos as a quick example, having stuff like this has made it to where your gameplay is so much smoother. I was actually following and watching Dadbot Gaming today. If y'all don't know who Dadbot is, he's a hilarious streamer. I have a great time hanging out with him. If you've never gone over to his stream, well, honestly, I encourage you to. I encourage you to check out other content creators all the time. In fact, this is what it looks like. Bam! This is Dadbot. He's currently streaming right now, twitch.tv/Dadbot Gaming. And if you're wondering what he's wearing, well, go ask him. So what you end up having as new players are coming in and new advice is coming in, and should you skip these ships? And honestly, part of this was Dadbot has skipped the 32 rares. Do you skip the 42 uncommons? I'm here to tell you that I don't believe that you do. And let me give you an example of why. Now, I talked about Solar Armadas as a visual example, so let me bring that up. Right now, I'm going to scroll down to the last time, which, by the way, all these logs are a good example of why I don't skip the 42s. I'll show you that in a second as well. But let's skip on down. I want to find it when I was running the Solar Armadas. Here we go. So I defeated this just to blow some ships. But let's look at this 52 I take on. This is a Jemadar 52. Pretty beefy boat. This is me punching 6 levels above using a Defiant, a Katinga, and my Pylon. All of my faction ships here are tier 5, which is not ridiculously expensive to get to. Let me actually show you what the cost is here. I'll show you the Katinga. These are raw cost, by the way. Katinga there at the far right, but you can see it's relatively the same for all 3 of them. And when I say raw cost, this does not include your efficiencies, researches, artifacts, favors, whatever it is that you have that can lower the cost of these individual items. So this is not, you're not actually spending 57,000 uncommon gas, but you do find a lot of value in the game when you have these ships. But at one point it was a very legitimate idea to just completely do away with them, skip them, don't worry about them, and just bypass them completely. But what you find now is that tier 5 is a pretty manageable, reasonable goal for almost any player in the game, and it allows you to take advantage of stuff like this. Why is this important? Well, I'm showing you my level 46 account. We can show you multiple accounts and multiple players, but what it does is open up so many doors. So if I go to my Bajoran rankings here and my favors, I've unlocked a lot of favors with little to no effort. I never really struggle to come pull my chest. In fact, the way that I can grind, because I have 2 uncommons that are tier 5 and a 46 is tier 5, I'm punching so far above my level that I end up getting like a week or two's worth of solos done immediately without spending as many directives as I might normally need to spend. Let me give you a visual of what that looks like. So if I back out, let's go to my items menu. Let's go and take a look at, well, how many directives are you sitting on, Rev, sitting here bragging about how you don't really need to do stuff? I'm sitting on 7,800 rares right now. I literally have more rares than I have solos because I'm able to hit higher than normal. And if you're a level 35 player getting into Solar Armadas, that means if you had an Enterprise and an Intrepid and the Gladius, or just an Enterprise and an Intrepid and a Defiant, you're going to probably be able to punch a couple levels higher, whereas at 35, you're easily hitting those level 40 armadas, thus increasing the efficiency of your return rates. Now, I do realize that when I'm talking about those armadas, you can't actually get rares yet in the mid 30s in terms of solos, but I'm just giving you an example of what doors it opens up for you. And keep in mind that I'm not trying to advocate for you to invest highly in these ships, but what I am saying is there's a lot of value in them, even if you keep them low tier. Back in the day, yeah, I was real big on maxing. You pick a ship and you max it based on what you needed to run. So I have a max Gladius, and I actually took the Gladius pretty high back in the day. You don't really need to do that anymore unless, and this is a caveat, and I think it's an important caveat, and I actually want everybody to contribute in the comment section here. Let me know if you agree with what I'm about to say. I'm a firm believer that here's how high you take ships. Tier 5 if you want a long-term effective armada boat. Tier 7 if you want a good effective PvP ship. And finally, tier 9 if you want an elite PvP ship. The only people who should be worrying about taking a 4-star ship, for example, my beautiful Pylum, to tier 12, are the very heavy spenders. And there's nothing wrong with that heavy spenders. If y'all want to continue to support the game by spending ridiculous amounts of money, 2 places you can do it: the Scopely store and Rev store. Check out the merch link description below. But seriously, if you're talking about where do you find efficiency in terms of the balance between power and the balance between, well, should I invest in research or should I invest in tiers of ships? I think 5 will give you a guaranteed good PvE ship and a good armada ship. Tier 7 will give you a better armada ship, but actually makes you pretty viable in PvP, especially long term. And I would take the Pylum to tier 7 no matter what. And then tier 9, if you really want to be that enforcer who has all that extra juice plus research. So that is kind of like where I'm at in terms of overall balance. But there's more value than just solo armadas. One thing that I've been doing a lot lately is I've got 3 PVE grinders. I've got one, my Pipe Road Chin, using on my Katinga. Then I've got my Pylum, of course, running full Strange New Worlds. This is not the Pylum, but imagine it's the Pylum. Point is, it's another, well, I think I got the Pylum on a PvP run right now. I did, because we had a PvP event today. So, but anyway, this is where my Pylum would normally be. So imagine the Pylum, and then my 3rd grind ship is my Valdore, running Picard, Beverly, Cath. Yes, I know not everybody has Picard because sourcing is terrible, but you get my point. You could run, Next Gen LaForge, Next Gen Crusher here if you really wanted to. You could run 5 Gorkon Khan as an alternative hostile grinding crew, but it helps to have crews on ships that are relatively powered to where you're at. Whereas if I was still using the Enterprise, I wouldn't be able to do as well in what I typically grind. And what I've been doing, and those who watch the live stream know this, is I'm coming into these systems like Sol, and I'm grinding out heavies with 2 ships, and then I'm grinding out the regular transports with 1 ship. So this heavy, this is a Pylum's job. This regular transport, that's the Katinga's job, and the other heavy, that's the Valdore's job. So I'm using 3 ships to grind, and what I'm able to do, because I've taken multiple ships, not ridiculously heavily invested in, I've taken multiple ships to tier 5, making them capable in PvE and armadas, and I have basic crews for all 3. My Klingon rep, in 1 hour, I'm grinding 10 million rep a day, and just 1 hour, and I'm getting about 10 extra G4 blueprints because I'm grinding in Sol. And this is just a mid-40s example. You can still apply this to being a level 30 player or 39 players. Let's say you're level 39, guess what you're doing? Taking the same 3-ship idea, and you're probably down here in Tygo Core because everybody's obsessed with Tygo Core because of the ridiculously high payouts in rep and the really good drops and all these other things. Makes complete sense. But the point is, if you're talking about today's game and how it's changed, there was a time where we didn't really care about how many ships we had. It was more about getting 1 ship as good as possible. But the game has kind of shifted, and now the game is playing a little bit more of a horizontal game than a pure vertical game. And for you to be as effective as you can possibly be, stretching yourself out wider is more valuable than being the tippy the top dog. Yes, does that mean that somebody who is level 46 with a tier 9 ship is probably going to beat my tier 5? Yes, it does. But what I am finding is I'm progressing faster in research, which means faster in resource acquisition, which means more enjoyable gameplay. Now, for those curious, what do I mean by faster resource acquisition? Let's go back to those Bajoran favors I mentioned. Scroll on down to these. Look at these. Bajoran Gas Refinery, Crystal Refinery, Ore Refinery. Oh, by the way, I struggle not at all in getting the hostile exchange done. I struggle not at all at triple pulling my reputation advancement. I struggle not at all with going through my Mantis loop. I don't struggle because I've gone through crews and I have multiple ships able to do multiple things. So, I mean, I can use my Mantis to grind and also use my Pylum to grind if I'm using 5 Giorgio Tau, which everybody will be getting Tau if you've been playing over the past couple months. You're already halfway there no matter what, and you're probably going to end up with it for free within the next 2 months. So multiple ships have allowed me to do more, whereas back in the day, like if you look at old Rev Deuce videos, I had a maxed Enterprise, and that's all I needed. I was good. I was Gucci. Who needed anything else but a maxed Enterprise? And now, I probably wouldn't recommend maxing. I'd still say tier 7, tier 9 if you really want to punch in PvP. But this goes back to what I think you should do. I think if you want to be an effective, efficient player in the game, skipping ships is no longer ideal, but maxing them is no longer really the goal, which used to be a really big deal. Now it's more finding a balance so that you can do more, and that more ends up giving you more back in terms of your gameplay. But also curious to see what everybody else thinks as well. There's still some things that I think have little to no value in the game. Great example is this. Has little to no value in the game, but it looks pretty. I build the ISS Jelly. Any new player today, I would say build it tier 2, tier 3 at the absolute max because of warp range and stop. But there was a time where tier 5 was a good idea just because you needed the warp range and no other ships got to where you wanted to go. But now there's so many ships that have the warp range that can get you where you want to go. So the game changes and it adapts. And now I'm going to sit here and tell you that, yeah, I don't think you should skip that Burrell. Just maybe don't get the Burrell and the Enterprise. Get the Burrell and the Augur, or get the Burrell and the D4. Have multiples and no longer skip at certain tiers. Just maybe don't invest as heavily as you were thinking about. But let me know what you think in the comment section down below. This is my advice. Hopefully you can see how it's working for me, how being level 46 with a couple of miners and a disco out, 63 million power is pretty damn respectable, and having a pylon that's a 25 miller at tier 5 is pretty respectable. But that's all because of this strategy we've really changed with in the past year. Live long and prosper. Stay safe for those Space Cowboys. Deuces, that's me. Catch you on the next one. And hey, come check us out on Twitch and check us out on Discord as well if you haven't joined already. We also love shouting out our other content creators. So shout out to the 2 that I've worked with today, Dadbot Gaming, Stewie Doo. I'll even put the links to them in the description because we love supporting our fellow content creators. And we'll catch you on the next one. Out.
An even better outro than the intro. For the Empire and glory to your house.